Hello, friends. I am recording the day after Election Day, which means 1, I'm tired and my coffee is very strong. 2, I'm glued to the election results and I know I'm in the right profession because I'm loving it. And 3, I am incredibly thankful to live in California and thankful for everyone who voted in the midterm elections. Hi, my name is Angela Chavez, the Communications Director at Courage California, and you're listening to Courage. It looks good on you. Today we'll be doing things slightly different as we near the holiday season. We'll hear from Courage California team members who have spent the year helping pass progressive state legislation, getting out the vote for our many elections, and holding our electeds accountable to find out what they're thankful for in 2022. Before I pass the mic over, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our presence on the traditional and unceded territory of hundreds of First Nations who are the traditional caretakers of the land that we call California.
Thank you, Angela. My name is Isidra Chavez, the Communications Associate here at Courage California, and today we have a very special episode of Courage. It looks good on you. The month of November is dedicated to thankfulness, and in today's episode, I will be asking members of our Courage team what they are thankful for about our wonderful state of California. It's been an eventful year, to say the least, but there's still plenty worth celebrating and being thankful for. We're going to start off our thankfulness episode with my colleague, Lindsay West, who has been with Courage for 10 years now and is our current operations director. Hey there, Lindsay.
Hey, Isidra.
Why don't you start by telling us where in California you're tuning in from?
Los Angeles.
Perfect. And what is something that makes you grateful to be able to do the work that you do here in California?
I think, being in California and being active in one's community is that there's so many different communities that you can be active in, A, because it's such a huge state, and B, it's just really easy to find people who are kind of on the same page as you are. Particularly, it's based on, where you are in the state. So I live in a more liberal pocket of LA. It's easy to find people with similar interests.
Thank you. So next, what is one statewide, local, or national win that you want to uplift or celebrate this year?
I want to take it back to last year with the no on the recall of the governor, which passed and he was allowed to stay. And I think that kind of set the tone for this year. Hopefully it discouraged some initiatives or some measures that were a little more extreme or kind of like a cheap way to get power. So I think voting no on the recall last year set the tone for a lot of this year.
That's a really good point. So in general, what are you thankful for?
Aside from being thankful to live here, even though it's expensive and crowded and there are helicopters all the time, the weather is pretty excellent. And I think it's easy to forget that and kind of take it for granted. And when I moved out of the state, I didn't realize, I mean, I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't really understand it until I had lived through a couple winters, and just the lack of light, was a lot. So I'm pretty thankful, that it's November 1st and it's 75 degrees outside right now. That's pretty fantastic.
That's beautiful. How are you celebrating fall so far?
I think I'm wearing more layers. I know that sounds unoriginal or boring, but when it's time to put on a light jacket, I know the seasons are changing. And even though we don't have a proper fall here in LA, I think it's pretty cool to see. You can feel the temperature when it gets a little cooler or when it gets darker earlier. So, yeah.
Of course. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for chatting with me.
Of course.
Up next, we get to hear from Jay Chodermal, who has been with Courage for 3 years now and is our Senior Communications and Voter Engagement Manager. Hey there, Jay. How are you doing today?
Hi, Isidra. I'm doing good. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Oh, that's great to hear. Why don't you start by telling us where in California you're tuning in from?
So I'm joining y'all from Chumash land, also known as Goleta, California.
Oh, that's wonderful. What is something that makes you grateful to be able to do the work that you do here in California?
Oof, it's really hard to nail this down to one specific thing, but I will say that being involved in movement work for equity and justice in California is incredibly fulfilling due to the folks that we are in community with doing this work. It's very clear that people care about our state, their communities, and are doing this for all the right reasons. And it's incredible to be a part of this work. And personally, what makes me grateful, other than working with incredible people, is the influence that we are able to have here in California. So as the old adage goes, as goes California, goes the nation. So it's really, really exciting to be able to have this influence, not just in California, but throughout the whole country. And I recently read a report that mentioned that California is soon to be the fourth largest economy in the world. And I just think it's so incredible that we are a part of creating a progressive agenda and a better economy that works for working families. And hopefully that translate to other economies and the rest of the country. So there are so many reasons why I'm grateful to do this work, but I think that the people we do the work with is incredibly motivating and inspiring, and the influence we are able to have here in California, throughout the nation and the world is a tremendous responsibility, and I am very grateful to be able to do this for my career.
Yes, that's a really good point. And I think it really shows our influence.
So much needs to be done here. And if we could set a good example and do it right, other states, other countries will just replicate what we are doing. Because if we prove that it works and it works well, I mean, that's great. And folks will follow, as has been the trend with California since as far back as I know.
Yes, and we love to hear that. Okay, so our next question. What is one statewide, local, or national win that you want to uplift or celebrate this year?
So one thing that happened this legislative cycle is that all of Courage California's priority bills passed the legislature and were signed into law. So I think that it is incredible, and we should celebrate that the work that we did here at Courage as it pertains to legislative organizing, lobbying, were very, very successful. And specifically, I would like to point out some of the labor bills that we got passed and are now law. So AB 2183, I believe, which is a farm workers bill that allows folks to vote with a representation ballot card, as well as the Fast Recovery Act, AB 257. So these are great labor bills that we were able to champion this year and get through the legislature and signed into law. Unfortunately, we are already seeing some pushback with some of these bills, now laws, by corporations. So I do think that even though we had a very successful legislative cycle this year, as an organization, we need to be mindful and continuing to protect these gains that we got, celebrate them, but also keep pushing for more progress, because so much more needs to be done here in the state so that working families are able to be financially secure, put food on the table, a roof over their heads, save for kiddos to go to college. There's just so much more that needs to be done. But this legislative cycle was great as it pertains to our priority bills getting signed into law.
Yeah, that is some really amazing news. And yes, the fight continues, but we must also celebrate.
Already started, Isidra.
Oh, it's here. The fight is here.
It is here, but you know what? That's why we got to celebrate it and keep pushing, because that's how we get stuff done permanently, right? So just got to keep at it. But there's a lot to celebrate this year for sure.
Of course, keep fighting. Okay, so next question. In general, what are you thankful for?
Ooh, this is another one that's hard to pinpoint to one specific thing. But I will say generally, I am very thankful for my family and our health. My family is the reason why I got involved in political work. So the fact that we are all doing well at this moment is a reason for me to be very, very thankful. But also, as I shared earlier in our conversation, the ability for me to do this work every day, work that has so much meaning for my life, is so personal to me, is something that I am incredibly grateful for, and I do not take for granted, because I realize that we are in a unique position to be able to do this. It's an incredible responsibility, and it is something that I don't take lightly. And I remind myself every day that I am very, very lucky and fortunate to be able to fight for my community, for my family, for folks that need someone to help lift up the things that they are going through and address the issues that our society is facing. So a lot to be thankful for. Can't pinpoint it to any one specific thing, but it's a pleasure to do this work. And I'm always thankful when I'm around my family and they're doing well.
That's beautiful. And Courage is very, very thankful to have you too, Jay.
Oh, I so appreciate it, Isidra. And the feeling is mutual.
Well, thank you so much, Jay, for chatting with me.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Up next, we get to hear from Courage California's Executive Director, Irene Kao. Hey there, Irene. How are you doing today?
Hi, Isidra. I am doing pretty well. Today is, of course, a few days out from final day of this election cycle. So I'm feeling a mix of emotions, both nervous and also hopeful. But I also know, we've got a couple more weeks until results really get final. So I'm just gearing up for another month of elections that will happen after Election Day.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, so why don't you start by telling us where in California you're tuning in from?
Of course. So I am based in Oakland, so on Ohlone territory.
That is wonderful. So our first question is, what is something that makes you grateful to be able to do the work that you do here in California?
Everything? Well, so jokingly, I say that, and that's also half or more, maybe more than half serious. I think that what I always appreciate about California is that because of the hard work of activists, especially and leaders here in the state over decades, we are always going to have a pathway for progress here in California. So even though a few decades ago we were sort of known as the home of Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, our state has changed a lot in the last few decades, and now we're seen as a leader in the nation in almost the opposite direction. So more the leader on equity, justice, and definitely pushing forward on, in contrast to where we're seeing in other states. But even we're seeing here in specific regions of California where there's a push for pulling back on rights. There's a lot of right-wing extremism. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. But I would say overall as a state, we're still able here to really push on policies and push for leaders to really expand rights and protections for communities. So, California being a sanctuary state for immigration, but now a lot of folks are thinking about California as a sanctuary state for abortion and for other rights and for trans communities as well. And so it makes me really grateful here that, even though I'm nervous about this coming election and expect there to be some mixed results, I'm also grateful knowing that we will likely have some pretty big and key wins here in California. And that also, no matter what the results, we have the infrastructure and the partners here to really still push forward on progress. So pushing on climate change policy, pushing forward on housing policies in ways that some of our partners in other states can't, where they may be facing Republican-dominated state legislature, Republican governor, or maybe they are just one of a few progressive groups who are really doing political work really aggressively. So I'm just really grateful that we do this work here in California. And I think a lot of what we've seen in the last few years happen at the national level makes me especially grateful for what we have here in California.
And that's a really good point. There's definitely a lot to celebrate and look forward to with this upcoming election.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings me to my next question, which is, what is one statewide, local, or national win that you want to uplift or celebrate this year?
I mean, that's an interesting thing to think about just heading into the election. When I do reflect on what happened in the primary election, I'll say one thing that I thought was a big win was the re-election of District Attorney Diana Becton in Contra Costa County. And the reason why is because late last year, this year, and we're also seeing it being a really strong narrative heading into this election, and is likely also going to spill over into the next year or two, is sort of the conversation around public safety and what is it that really makes our community safe. So, similarly, the same election, we saw Chesa Boudin get recalled as the San Francisco district attorney as sort of the fall person for things that were or were not happening in San Francisco, which are definitely not attributable just to one person like Chesa.
Mm-hmm.
So having Diana Becton win re-election as, at least currently right now, the only Black district attorney in the state of California, as someone who successfully implemented reforms in Contra Costa County and works really closely with community groups and the most impacted communities on an ongoing basis, to me was a really big point in refuting the idea that everyone was sort of backing sort of more tough on crime sort of narratives, and that people were really wanting to embrace more policing. It was really just more about her election being a really good reminder that people really still support reforms to the system and really see somebody like D.A. Becton being successful and wanting to have her back in for a few more years to continue leading the county that way. And for me, that also leads into then this conversation around the general election too, where we're seeing public safety being an issue, where candidates are really trying to define themselves from each other, and the parties are starting to define them from each other. And I worry that people who oversimplify things and point to one solution or point to specific reforms as being at fault, I'm just worried about that overshadowing us having gone through the pandemic and just also things just being very tumultuous over the last few years. And so I'm also hoping that we see some more wins for public safety and for criminal justice reform, and especially, again, like fingers crossed for us, our endorsed candidate, Pamela Price, for Alameda County District Attorney. So that's what I'm hoping we also get to celebrate pretty soon too.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And there's definitely opportunity for change this election, it sounds.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so our last question is, in general, what are you thankful for this year?
I am probably most thankful for the people in my life, both in terms of personal and work. So I'll start with work first. I think even when I feel the most discouraged, I always reflect on how meaningful it is for Courage California to have a membership of hundreds of thousands, millions of people around the state of California, around the nation, who care about the same issues, who share the same values around equity, justice, and accountability, and who are really willing to turn out campaign after campaign, election after election, year after year to keep fighting for things. Because it is really easy for leaders to say one thing, do another, but when they know that people like the Courage California members are watching them and are willing to hold them accountable, it's really notable. I mean, when we have our members sign on to letters that we send to the state legislature, calling representatives, talking to the governor, it really makes a difference because they know that Courage's members really care and they're paying attention. And again, we're willing to hold them accountable. And so it brings us, I think, a platform that I think is really powerful here in the state and the nation. And that also means I'm also really thankful for the people who support Courage's work. So our donors, our biggest supporters, some of whom are new to us, maybe because a particular campaign or election that we worked on really spoke to them and really compelled them, or for the people who have been with us for years and years and years because they started with us on one specific campaign or were really interested in our work in one issue area, but have really stuck with us and grown, helped us really grow our work. And I think that's what's incredible to me is, I mean, California has a state of 40 million people and 22 million people and counting as registered voters. And that's just such an incredible scale of people power here in this state. And so having members and donors who over the years have really, again, grown with us and given us the support that's allowed us to really grow and expand our work and expand our influence in the state. I mean, that's really incredible. And that's something I'm just really, really grateful for. And then I think last related to work is probably our partners. So I think some people know that we work with partners around the state and around the nation. You know, we do events with them, we do sometimes joint campaigns, but I think sort of more behind the scenes is a lot of our work is about having conversations with partners around the state, sort of listening to each other, talking to each other, coordinating on things, strategizing both on the things right in front of us, but also for the future. And on a more personal note, sometimes, again, when we're feeling discouraged or we have a really significant loss or something that's been really frustrating, sometimes there is nothing that cheers me up more than just talking with somebody we work really closely with to sort of pick apart what's happening, why it's happening, and what comes next, and return to a place of feeling like, well, this is where we're at and this is our pathway forward. And so feeling really grateful for having the partnerships that we have that ground us and also keep us feeling like still very powerful and still very hopeful. And so, a couple partners like Communities for a New California, Inland Empire United, Data for Social Good that we do our polling with, the Black Women for Wellness and Black Women for Wellness Action Project, California Enviro Voters. I mean, there's just a whole big list of partners that we work really closely with that I'm really excited about. Chispa in Orange County. Now I feel like this is going to be like an award ceremony where I'm definitely leaving a whole list of people and partners off. But when we're looking at how we're working with people and who's showing up in our conversations and who we're just doing the work with, it gives me a lot of hope. And it makes me just really excited because, on a personal level and also in a work capacity too, it can sometimes feel like at the hard times, feel very lonely and cynical. And it's just easy to get very pessimistic. And when you work with partners who are that dedicated, for me, like that nerdy, like just this sort of level of detail we talk about and the way we talk is just so unique and it's really wonderful. And I just really love it. I really love it a lot. And I think knowing that this is the ecosystem that we're working with here in California, again, nationally, it makes me really happy. It makes me really excited. And that is probably the one thing that makes me really hopeful that even though things can feel very discouraging, very dark right now, I know that the work we're doing, the people we work with, we are the majority here in California and nationwide. And I also know that we're the future of politics and policy. And so, yeah, I have a lot of reason to be hopeful and thankful.
Of course. There's a lot of hope that comes from having these partners and these members who are engaged when election fatigue and all of this is very real.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, and of course, I also forgot, I'm also especially grateful for the Courage California team. So that is both the people we work with on staff and also our board of directors. It's incredible thinking that we are a statewide organization, yet we have fewer than 10 people on our team and we're covering a whole state. And there is just nothing like going through some pretty hard, very rapid response, just all hands on deck. Things are just feeling very hectic and chaotic, and just having people who are going to show up and do the work, and we do it with pride and with a lot of compassion. That's something I'm also really thankful for. We have an incredible team. I really love this team a lot.
We do. And thank you so much, of course, for your leadership as well. And thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Isidra. This was so much fun.
Up next, we get to hear from Jen Job, our digital campaign consultant who has been with Courage for 8 years. Hey there, Jen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Well, that's great to hear. So why don't you start by telling us where you're tuning in from?
I am your one non-California employee. So I am in Apex, North Carolina.
Ooh, exciting. So our first question is, what made you decide to pursue your activism work here in California?
Well, Courage actually came to our firm in 2014 because things had changed in the political landscape, and you're trying to also shift to digital fundraising as one of the main fundraising avenues. So we began doing it then. But I've actually gotten more into digital campaigning with you because I really look to California as a beacon of what progressive politics can really be. There's just so much possibility here.
Yeah, so we know that you're outside of California. So I'll go ahead and ask you as well, what makes you grateful to be able to do your work here in California?
Well, there's policies that can pass in California that just can't pass in the state I'm in or in much of the rest of the country. I think like one example is making insulin in-house. You all have the fifth biggest economy in the world, not just the country. So there are just like amazing things that California can do for its people.
Yeah, that's something that even I, as a California resident, don't really consider in my time here. It's a bit of a privilege to be able to be in California and do this work here.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for sharing. Our next question is, what is one statewide, local, or national win that you want to uplift or celebrate this year?
I'll actually say three. I'll go national, statewide in California, and then just one plug in North Carolina. National, I think passing the Inflation Reduction Act was a big deal. It was the biggest investment in environmental causes that we've had in decades, if ever. It finally took away corporations' ability to shirk taxes entirely. I think we need to do more. I think we need a billionaire's tax, and I think we need a windfall profit tax, but I think this was a really good start. I really appreciate that California was able to shut down. I know this was at the end of last year, but to shut down the recall of Gavin Newsom, also shut down the recall of the DA in Los Angeles this year. I think that recalls are getting way overused as a political weapon, and I'm glad that they were able to push back against that. In North Carolina, we actually just today won a huge case that means that the state is going to have to fund education in a way that it hasn't before. So it's called the Leandro case, and it's really exciting that we got a really good verdict today.
That is really good and really exciting to hear for your state as well.
Mm-hmm.
So our last question is, in general, what are you thankful for this year?
I am thankful for the people in California and beyond who are willing to fund our work. I think that Courage is doing amazing things and is going to go on to do even more amazing things. And it's only possible because people are giving $10, $20, $30 when they have the chance. And they're really willing to invest in making California more equitable and just. And that's incredibly important. And I'm very thankful for it.
Thank you so much, Jen. And we are definitely grateful and thankful for you, who is in charge of reaching out to our members and getting their support.
Yep. Happy to help.
Thank you so much for chatting with me, Jen.
All right. Talk to you later.
Up next, we get to hear from Mai Do, who has been Courage's policy and partnership lead for about 9 months now. Hey there, Mai Do. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thank you.
That's great to hear. So why don't you start by telling us where in California you're tuning in from?
Well, I'm currently tuning in from Santa Clarita, which is in northern LA County.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so our first question is, what is something that makes you grateful to be able to do the work that you do here in California?
This is such a great question. I think being able to see the amazing, diverse people across California work together and collaborate in order to bring about positive change in our communities is something that really motivates me every single day. And I'm so grateful to be able to see that work in action.
Yes, I'd say our strength definitely comes from our community. So that kind of brings me to my next question, and that is, what is one statewide, local, or national win that you want to uplift or celebrate this year?
Yeah, so as policy and partnerships lead, of course, things like state legislation sort of fall a little more into my wheelhouse. So I think some of the things that come to mind first are some of the incredible bills that we've seen passed by the state legislature and signed into law this year. And that includes, but is certainly not limited to, AB 256 by Selimur Kalra, and then AB 257, which is a Holden and Carrillo bill. And AB 256 is going to make the California Racial Justice Act of 2020 retroactive to ensure that people in prison and in jail who are incarcerated can challenge racial bias in their convictions and trials. And then AB 257 is also a historic bill which will enact the Fast Recovery Act to improve standards for workers in the fast food industry across the state. So both of these are really two pieces of landmark bills that I was really excited to see pass this year. Those wins were really only possible by communities being mobilized across the state to push for those pieces of legislation.
Yes, and didn't we get to do some lobbying for some of those bills at the state capitol?
Yes, it was awesome to go to the state capitol and to be able to talk with legislators about why these bills are priorities or were priorities for Courage California, as well as the communities that many of our partners work with.
Yeah, that was definitely a really inspiring experience for me coming from comms, being able to meet with those people and meet with legislators to talk about it. So thank you so much for bringing those up. And lastly, we want to know, in general, what are you thankful for?
I think in general, I'm really thankful for my family and fellow community members who continue to remind me about why I'm involved in this work and why I try and contribute to broader movements for justice every day. I wouldn't really be doing this if I wasn't rooted, I think, in my family and in broader community.
Yes, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Maido.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Up next, we get to hear from Mai Tao, our political director who has been with Courage for 8 months. Hey there, Mai. How are you doing today?
Hi, Isidra. I am doing well. It is the Friday of GOTV weekend before the November 8th election. So it's busy. There's lots of things going on, just kind of hecticness around the next couple of days. And so I'm just trying to stay up with the energy level that I need to make it through to the finish line.
Yes, and we're almost there.
Very close, yes.
Okay, perfect. So why don't you start by telling us where in California you're tuning in from?
So I am currently in Fresno, California, in the Great Central Valley of the state.
Yes, our members are all across the state. We love that. Okay, so our first question is, what is something that makes you grateful to be able to do the work that you do here in California?
One thing that I've always appreciated living in California, even though we're such a massive state, is that we have so many different types of people and communities, and it's just so diverse. And so I think that there are so many experiences on the social and political level that come with the history of the different communities that make up California. So it's just, to me, a really beautiful place to live, but also a really beautiful place to feel a sense of community in. And there are, some unique differences with different communities, but at the end of the day, there are just some really common core pieces of our humanity that really bring us together. So I am just grateful for the love and the respect and the hope and the willingness to, make each and every one of our lives better, but collectively as a whole, as Californians.
Yes, Californians make it happen in the state. So our next question, what is one statewide, local, or national win that you want to uplift or celebrate this year?
Well, as we know, earlier this year, unfortunately, the United States Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade. And I would say that a win in California is that we still have access to reproductive health and freedom. And there were a few different efforts this year in the legislative cycle. And there's actually a current statewide proposition that our voters will be voting for in this general election on November 8th called Proposition 1, which would enshrine reproductive freedom into the state's constitution. So, yeah, I think overall, just with what's happening in other parts of the nation, and definitely just seeing the horror of Roe v. Wade being struck down, I just am, really centering all of the birthing people and all of the future and current parents or people who want to become parents, right? Who, want to have complete control over their reproductive rights. I think overall in California, I'm just grateful that I have that ability. And the legislative cycle in 2022, there were actually 15 different pieces of legislation that were pushed forward that would actually deepen some of these protections as well. So I'm really thankful that there are state legislators that really, wanted to ensure these protections, but not only protect what we currently have, but push more on some of the things since that decision was made. And so some of the highlights that I can share are SB 1375, which would increase the number of providers by allowing some nurse practitioners to independently perform first trimester abortions without a doctor's supervision. And then there's also other bills such as AB 2091 that would prohibit medical providers and health insurers from sharing information in cases that seek to penalize abortion, right? So there was a package that was passed in the 2020 legislative cycle in California. Even though our state currently, you do have reproductive rights and freedom to contraceptives and abortion in the state of California, these additional pieces of legislation are really, really looking out for, all birthing people and individuals who are wanting to think about their reproductive freedom and family planning and what that looks like for them in their future.
That is so great to hear. And it's really great that you're mentioning this to uplift these wins, because even I wasn't aware that all of these new laws were being made this year. So thank you so much for highlighting those.
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes because we live in the state of California, and because, right, our state wasn't completely directly impacted with Roe v. Wade, we do walk around with some privileges, right? And not everybody is fully aware of what are the fundamental rights, but what are more rights and protections that we could build into reproductive freedom and reproductive health. And there's still so much work to be done around all of those things, for sure, even in California.
Yes, there's still definitely space for more and for more progress. So thank you so much for answering that. Our next question is, in general, what are you thankful for?
Well, I think at this particular time, just really thankful for, waking up every day and having food on the table, having a roof over my head, having, family and loved ones in the midst of COVID, right? And this pandemic, even some of those kind of fundamental or foundational things that I think sometimes, we kind of lose sight, or we just think are guarantees in our lives. In moments like this, those things become super precious, right? And I'm just really thankful for those really, really fundamental things and privileges that I have in my life. But overall too, just so thankful to be waking up every day, to be able to put my time and energy and resources into the movement and the work, especially that Courage California is involved in. And I get to, wake up fighting the good fight and being a part of efforts that I truly, genuinely believe in and are values aligned and are really trying to make, our communities, California, and even the nation and globally, right? The impact of justice. So just, thankful for that as we're getting closer to thinking through the end of the year and wrapping up.
Thank you so much, Mai Tao, for chatting with me today. It was such an insightful conversation and a nice wrap, I'd say, for our year.
Yeah, so excited. Thank you so much, Isidra. And amazing to have great coworkers like you and colleagues who are in this good old fight together too. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thank you. The last Courage team member that will be joining us today is the voice of our Courage It Looks Good on You podcast, our host, Angela Chavez. Angela Chavez is our communications director and has been with Courage for 3 years now. Hey there, Angela. How are you doing today?
Hi, Isidra. I'm doing good. I'm so excited to be interviewed by you today.
That's great. And I'm excited to be interviewing all of our team members. So why don't you start by telling us where in California you're tuning in from?
So I am in Sacramento, California. How lucky am I? This is where all the fun stuff happens.
Ooh.
If politics is fun to you.
It is. Okay, so let's dive into our first question. What is something that makes you grateful to be able to do the work that you do here in California?
Well, I would say California is no stranger to wild amounts of money and funding from corporate campaigns. Our state is massive and diverse. Yet my favorite thing about California is its people power. And the power of our people to do community organizing, our state has been able to pass some really important progressive legislation that serves our communities. And it's because of people power. Despite the amount of money in our politics here, California has done some amazing things. And it was really been driven by Californians, the people, our communities, our families, like just showing up and making it happen. And that is something I am really thankful for, to be working here in California.
I will say that is the trend from the rest of our team members. We've really been shouting out Californians and our members for being responsible for the change that we're doing here in the state.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so that's wonderful to hear. Going on to our next question, I wanted to ask, what is one statewide, local, or national win that you want to uplift or celebrate this year?
Gosh, I feel like courage has been in so many things this year, and it's really hard to narrow it down. I think one that I would point to is the re-election of District Attorney Diana Becton in Contra Costa. You know, that came at a time when we were seeing both reformers and reforms being targeted by like right-wing strategists. And there was like a lot of inaccurate and misleading claims being thrown around. And we saw like recall attempts. It was just insane. If you remember June of 2022 here in California, and there was district attorneys battling for their jobs. And it was really unfortunate because a lot of it was unnecessary. And DA Becton was one of those. She's just a great district attorney in Contra Costa. And we were so thrilled to see that she was reelected. I feel like the voters really showed up in Contra Costa and made their voices heard. Communities want informed public safety reforms and accountability. And I think that was a really powerful thing to happen here in our state when so many district attorneys are just like, oh my gosh, they were really being targeted and it was unnecessary. I feel like we're all really glad here at Courage that DA Becton was reelected.
Yes, that's something our executive director, Irene, also wanted to celebrate this year. And Jen as well, she mentioned us being able to stop the recall in Los Angeles as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we're still waiting for that like non-election year because we've had so many this year and special elections and recalls, and we saw a lot this year. And
we did.
I'm really thankful that we got some powerful wins, and it takes me back to that people power. Like it wouldn't have happened without the people. So yes, kudos to you, Contra Costa.
Yes, we love to see it. Okay, so for our final question, in general, we wanted to know, what are you thankful for?
So I'm a little biased because I am a communications director and I have a background in journalism. And I also lead a book club, a Latina book club. So my bias, thankfulness is of storytellers. I am just so thankful for storytellers, particularly like leading a Latina book club. It's really highlighted the importance of diverse storytelling. I just think of like when I was growing up, I didn't see myself in books. You know, I had the Sweet Valley High, the Judy Blume books, and those didn't necessarily reflect me or my family or my community and things that I was experiencing. So it's so nice now to have such a diverse group of storytellers and authors and stories. And like our communities are really using their voices and are being seen in a way that, you know, I didn't have when I was growing up. So I really appreciate having those stories. And I also appreciate the storytellers because anyone and everyone who shares their story, like it takes bravery. It takes courage to do that. And I am thankful to those individuals who share on behalf of themselves, their families, and their communities, because, you know, they're giving everyone a chance to be seen. And I appreciate that. And a chance to feel seen. I remember, you know, I've had so many stories in these last couple of years where I'm like, I feel seen. That's my story. Thank you for sharing it. And it might have been like trivial to someone else, but to me, it was just like a powerful thing. So like, keep sharing your stories, keep being vocal. No one's story is insignificant. So I am all about storytellers.
That was beautiful. It definitely does take courage to share our stories. And I would say these storytelling and being able to identify with these stories is what really pushes for our communities to fight for change as well. So it's inspiring.
Yes, definitely. Like a lot of our leaders, they don't know. They don't know what's going on in our communities. Like we're the ones living it. We're the ones impacted. So yeah, it's important that we are seen. And, if we're not given the platform to be seen, then, we create that platform. We get that soapbox. So we make it happen.
Yes, we make it happen.
So I appreciate you asking me all these wonderful questions, Isidra. But now I want to ask you some questions. I know you've been busy interviewing the rest of our staff members, and now I'm curious to hear from you. What is something that makes you grateful to do the work that you do here in California?
Of course. Thank you for asking. I've been trying to think of my own answer as I listen to all of our team members. And for me, I think the richness and just diversity here in California is something that I am super thankful for. As a Latina, I find myself being not only comforted, but of course empowered living in a state with a large Latina community. So I think that's just one of the most beautiful things about California. And a lot of my drive and passion to continue the work that I do, I would say, comes from seeing the need for advocacy and the need for investment here in my community. I come from like a small rural town in Northern California that nobody knows the name of. So I feel like I'm very familiar with what low political efficacy looks like and who that benefits. So yeah, I think I'm just thankful for the reliance of the Latina community here in California and all of the hard work that leaders and everyday people put in to make this state what it is.
Yeah, definitely. Oftentimes it's a thankless job. So we're here to say thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, California. So that reminds me, what part of California are you in? What is this rural town that no one knows the name of?
Oh my gosh. It's called Olivehurst. We are part of the Yuba Sutter area, Yuba County.
I know where you're at, but that's only because I'm somewhat nearby.
Yes, we're close enough.
We're close enough that I've seen you on a map. Okay, awesome. So in general, this year, what are you thankful for?
In general, I'm very thankful for my family, and that includes my cats. I'm sure we all know that activism isn't an easy job. And like you said, sometimes it's thankless, but there's still a lot to celebrate. And a lot of us are thankful, and we make change and we make wins. So I'm very thankful for my family for being supportive of me and just taking care of me when I sometimes forget to take care of myself. So it's always nice to have, a little safety to go back to. And that just makes me keep pushing forward in the work that I do and keep persevering in this space.
Oh, that's so lovely. And that makes me think of an awards speech and everyone's paying attention to who you thank. And I totally didn't thank my family, but I'm thankful for them and my dogs too. They're great.
Yes, always the pets too.
So yeah. Oh yeah. Family. That's one I forgot. But yeah, thankful for that. Well, I appreciate you chatting with me, Isidra, and sharing what you're thankful for, and also just running this podcast episode for us. I'm thankful for that, for you stepping up and interviewing our staff members. And I'm so excited to see what next year brings us. So I'm thankful for all of our Courage team members and our listeners and donors and everybody that really makes this work possible. So thank you, Isidra, for showing up today and being such a great interviewer.
Thank you.
I'm your host, Angela Chavez, and this has been Courage. It Looks Good on You. I am so thankful for you, our listeners. Thank you for joining us today and joining us during our premiere season of Courage. It Looks Good on You. We appreciate you tuning in and sticking with us as we learn the ins and outs of podcasting. We'll return in early 2023 with some exciting new topics, interviews, and formatting. You're not going to want to miss what we have in store for season 2. So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, because you guessed it, we're just getting started. From our family to yours, I hope you have a wonderful and restful holiday season. Until next time, stay connected by following us at CourageCA and using the hashtag #CourageLooksGoodOnYou. With you, fashion, and courage, we can create a California that represents and serves us all. Gracias, mi gente, y saludos.